which work group. So I'll make sure to add her to this one.
Okay, she should be joining us, I would think.
Okay.
Should we get started?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started. Hi, everybody. How's everyone?
Okay.
Doing great.
There's been a lot of documents that came through. So I have like 5 documents on one screen. So if I look this way, it's because I'm looking at the agenda, the minutes from last
Good
time.
afternoon, everyone. I'm a little under the weather, a lot under the weather. So I'm gonna have my screen off today. Yep, babies just infect the whole house. That's all I can say. The whole house.
They do
Everybody
that.
has a stomach virus.
Yeah, you
It's
and
not
Ann
pretty.
are sick. Good thing we can't.
Yeah.
Feel better, Gordon. Okay, so we can get started. Let's just jump right into the agenda, if that's okay. I think everyone has the minutes from last time.
And also,
Ainsley.
Ainsley, I didn't get the link for today's meeting.
Okay. So what I did is I just like who the work group was whoever came to that first meeting. So I will make sure to add you. And maybe I'll send out another email to everybody saying if you want to sign up for this work
I
group.
did get a notification, but the link itself to join the
Gotcha.
meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Can we keep going and get started? I have a hard stop at 2, so I want to jump into this. And I don't think we need to do introductions or anything. We did that all last time. Everyone here seems familiar. Nobody new. So let's jump into it. I think everyone has the minutes from last meeting. The agenda is drafted to keep us on track with what we talked about last time, and we could certainly add new issues, but I think we decided as a group last time to start our focus on these 3 core issues. 1 around funding, number 2 around space, and 3 around incentives. So I think we're going to continue on that path of focusing on those 3. We've been doing a little bit of research around those areas. So we can talk about that. I know there's also on the agenda something about data collection, and I don't know, Steve, if that's connected to the data report that we received.
Yeah, I think when we get to that, that's what we can talk about.
Okay, great. Yeah, and there wasn't too much there around higher ed, but there was one piece that I think is missing that we should talk about. Okay. The first thing on our agenda was about funding for, using state aid for incarcerated learners. I know Danielle Cox is on the agenda to talk about that. Last time we met, we started talking about the challenges with Pell not covering full cost of tuition and programs struggling to start up because of that fact and struggling to sustain themselves because of the reliance on federal funding. So I think we all agreed that the need to explore whether or not incarcerated learners can tap into state aid that currently exists, or if we need to create something new. So we've been looking at what's happening in other states. But before we go there, I'll let Danielle speak about some of the conversations she's having with the Maryland Higher Ed Commission. Turn it over to you, Danielle.
Great, thanks. So yes, one of the things that we actually I have been talking with MHEC about over the course of probably about 2 years or so since I took over this position is, once I learned about Pell Grants and how much funding these students actually get versus how much it actually costs to go to school, and that a lot of our colleges are having to, waive like a ton of money or find donations or funders or some other way to pay for that gap. And now with the, let's just say, threat of loss of funding from the federal side, and those worries there. And I know, Andrea, you have shared a lot of the things that are kind of coming down the pipeline that is being required of you guys to report out. So, it's a little scary at this point. So we want to make sure that there is some sort of funding source available at the state level so that if that would happen, and also to cover that gap, right? And so it's not so much of a burden on our colleges. The universities and, private colleges have it's still a burden, but less of a burden than what our community colleges do, due to the territory restriction and having the student has to live in that county to get the in-county cost versus out of county. So, for instance, like Andrea said, Warwick is pulling out after this semester because they just can't afford it. The majority of our students don't live on the Eastern Shore. They live in Baltimore, right? Baltimore City, Baltimore County. So they have to charge them the out of county rate. So that is much larger than what the in-county rate is. In addition to the overhead cost that is now required because of all the restrictions with Pell coming down the pipeline for the new PEP requests. So,
excuse me, a question, Danielle. So it's not possible for somebody who's incarcerated at Eastern, ECI for years and years to claim that they're a resident of that county? No?
They're not technically a resident. Their residency is their home address, where they are going back to their home plan, where they were. Yeah, they can't do that. That is not our policy thing. I believe that's actually a law, state, some sort of law thing. Like we can't say that they live at the prison, right? Like it's not, that's not their home. So basically, that's why Warwick is pulling out. We do have, thank goodness, Hagerstown Community College gets a lot of funding separately from, federal and state sources. So does Anne Arundel. So they're coming in, but they're bigger also colleges that have more funding sources. So one of the things that I had been kind of asking about in the education, the cabinet meetings, the governor's education cabinet meetings, is about the resources for our students from state aid. I had actually brought that up with MHEC about 2.5 years ago when we started looking at the data for post-secondary. And getting that. Assistant Secretary Emily Dow has been great with kind of like working with that, because it's going to have to be MHEC that makes that COMAR change. The issue is that, yes, it doesn't say that they can't get state aid, but it also doesn't say that incarcerated individuals can. And and because it lists out who can and who can't, they have to be on that can list, right? So we need to it's a COMAR change. It's a state law change. So I have spoken in those cabinet meetings. We have talked to them, to MHEC, and also Secretary, I believe Secretary Rye at one point may have also, was involved in some of those conversations with Dr. Dow. That kind of has fizzled out a little bit over the last couple of months. Things have been really busy, especially with legislative session, budgets, those sort of things. So we decided we are going to take the time, though, after this legislative session over like that May, June, July time period to start writing it out so that can be submitted in August, September, when the agencies have to submit their requests for bill changes or new state laws. So that is, we're just kind of waiting for session and all the craziness with budgets, and because the secretary is very busy, so it's Assistant Secretary Dow to then start that process. But I will continue down that pipeline and that path and make sure that we definitely hit those, do that, and be that voice so that we can get that done. But they are not opposed to it. It just needs to be written down.
Yeah.
So the goal is to get that in as a bill for next legislative session. So
Danielle, can I ask you, is it to add language to allow incarcerated students to access existing scholarship and funding opportunities, or is it to create something specific just for that population?
sorry. We actually talked about both, and that's something when we actually sit down, we've got to come up with a decision on. If we have a separate source of funding that says, okay, we're going to, allocate $2 million to incarcerated individuals, this will be their state funds that they can, access, versus just allowing them to access that pot. Remember then, if we say we're allocating $2 million for them, that's $2 million that we have to request. And right now, with our budgetary constraints, I don't see that happening. That is something we are going to talk about, is those two options, but I don't see it being approved and going through if we go with that separate pot. That's my thoughts. Just coming from being state and knowing the budget and knowing those, we all know the state's budget constraints. So I really think it's probably would be best to go the route of, having it in that they can access it. But then that comes with its own worries and troubles. Is, are we going to get pushback then, because that's taking away from those other students the funding that they can access? Will constituents and certain legislators make that claim that, well, wait a second, they're incarcerated, now we're giving them access to this, they have Pell Grant? So they both come with their own concerns and issues. So that's something, we got to really sit down and feel out, like, which one do we think is going to get approved, right? We'll make it passed. So, but I will say, the governor's office is behind this, when we're in those meetings. So I think that it's a good thing. It's just funding versus the outcry, right? So we'll see.
So, could I ask a question?
Sure.
So I think the first option is just no. It just won't happen this time. Asking for more funds. I mean, that's a kind of a given with the budget situation. But the other one, I have a question about the other one. If I mean, I can see where there's going to be opposition. There's always people come in and say they don't deserve it, they shouldn't get it, blah blah. How much money is there? I mean, is from those of you who work with the resources for people, I mean, is there are they always running out of that money, or is there a good pile of money there? I mean, because if there's enough money to add another group, there might not be the opposition. But if you're competing and somebody else is not going to get it, does any sense of that?
Andrea, can you answer? I'm not sure what that looks like, that pot, how that's determined, that fund.
I don't know. I feel like MHEC would have to answer that. I have no idea. I would be curious to know. And we've talked about the fact that MHEC has the foster care recipient tuition waiver program, and they have the homeless tuition waiver program for those. So those two populations get tuition waivers, meaning they don't have to pay the cost of tuition to go to college. I would be curious of how much money is in those pots and how much is used as well. So but I have no idea. It would be MHEC to answer that.
Could we interview them or get somebody to talk to us from them? I mean,
I know Secretary Rice sometimes comes to these meetings, but I don't see him.
Don't we have a commission member from?
Yeah, I mean, he is part of, right, Ainsley, the commission. So yeah, John Chickens, I thought so. So that could be something that we asked at the next, bigger commission meeting about those pots. I'm not sure. I guess that's something more that we would get into, I'm sure, once we start meeting about it, but I'm not sure.
I think Christian had his hand up for a while.
For decades. Thank you, Judith. Should I just jump in or raise my hand?
You go ahead.
You
I
can
mean,
jump in.
general.
Well, he meant he's asking a general question, I think.
Oh,
Feel free to jump in.
Okay, thank you. I guess, and then apology, this was covered before. Does DPSCS have any kind of like internal grant operation? Has that been considered in the past?
You mean
meaning
so
do we?
funding for education for higher ed?
Sure.
No, we do not get funding from the state specifically for higher ed. Any of the money that I get from the state has to be an over the target request that I typically ask for. The other pot of money that I get, it's about $2 million. That is for laborers, some contractual teachers, librarian salaries, GED, paying for the GED test, that sort of thing. So no, I don't typically get, unless I go out for a grant, which, we did get a grant here this past year to provide education and employment, kind of like reentry people that will specifically help with education services for post-secondary, because it was a post-secondary grant. So they'll work with them pre and post release. That's, yeah. Any money I get, basically I got to find on my own.
Okay. Well, just an idea in my previous position I've held was, why can't the system hire like a grants person, but this person will kind of fund their own position, right? By going out and finding the grants, and then that funds their salary. So something like that.
We have a grants person that does that. She sends us all the grants that are available as they come out, and then whether we are eligible for it. So like if it's an education related something that would do with me, my services, usually she sends it out to all the directors in DPSCS that, hey, here's the available grants. This one just came out, that one came out. Here's what, we're eligible for. Here's what you have to do. I mean, it's a massive email of, regulations, all this stuff. She even sends us stuff that maybe we're not eligible for. It's a state agency, but other organizations are, just in case they come to us and ask us for those funds. But yeah, we have a grants director who does that. Yep.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of adding capacity, but is it possible to add someone? Because I get the impression that you all, right, it's like an extra thing on top of your primary duties.
Oh yeah,
So
I'm the one that has to write it. She tells us what's available. Yeah.
What if there was? I'm just proposing for the group, maybe just a thought experiment. But what if there was like an additional capacity person whose work paid for themselves, and maybe they apply for different grants across the systems, but their work paid for themselves. When you get a grant, you get to keep some of the administration fee and stuff like that. So they just kept all their job was just applying. So just throwing it out there. Maybe that's a way to add capacity. And I don't think this person has to be limited to the higher ed section, right? They can work across different sections to help the department procure more grants.
Okay.
The trick is that the person pays for themselves. Yeah, first they have to get some grants.
So maybe there's some seed money.
Happen.
Yeah, maybe there's like some seed money, right, in the first couple of years, and then you kind of, as you make more money, you're, whatever. But just throwing out there as an idea to help with the funding.
And it's not so much the applying for it, it's whether we have the capacity that if we get it to actually manage it, right? Like I am a team of, it was 2, 1.5. It's now 3, so it's like 3.5, but it's not my, you know what I mean? Like if I get that 1 million grant that I just got, I can't take any more than that with all the other stuff that I do and my staff do. There would just be no way that I can manage any other grants at this point. So it's not so much somebody applying, it's the people managing it, right?
Well, some grants come with, you put that in the budget too,
So a couple of people have had their hands up. I think John Griffin was first and then John Easter.
Yeah, so as I'm listening to all this, I'm just brainstorming. And I'm wondering, not knowing what issues may exist around this, what I'm wondering, is there any opportunity to look at private investing to fund some of these education initiatives? And I say that because as I've been building my own network for reentry, I'm aware of several private entities that are doing magnificent stuff, working with formerly incarcerated and incarcerated individuals, both inside and outside the walls in other states. And they fund educational programs, they fund workforce development programs, reentry programs. And I'm just wondering if there might be an opportunity that we could reach out to some of these organizations and see how they do it, and see if there's any way to get them involved in Maryland, or maybe perhaps get them to open a chapter in Maryland. Just wanted to put that out there as food for thought.
Who are you thinking of, for example?
Well, like there's an organization in New York called Thrive for Life. And granted, this is a religious-based organization. It's run by Catholics. But they specifically target, New York State incarcerated or justice-involved individuals, I guess I should say. There's another group out in Los Angeles, California, run by Greg Boyle, another Catholic Jesuit who has done tremendous work in getting thousands of justice-involved gang members back into the workforce. He educates them, he trains them, and he gives them jobs. They're all privately funded. They're not. They don't draw on any state resources. They have their own, I guess, fundraising apparatus that they use to generate these funding from private investors or private donors, and they're amazingly successful. So that's kind of who I'm thinking of. And granted, I'm speaking off the cuff. I'm probably not as educated about these programs as I should be, but I just wanted to still throw it out there as a possibility.
I don't think there's if people on this commission or on the stakeholders group could certainly go ahead and try to ask these people and bring that information back, see if there's some interest. I mean, go ahead for it. Both you and Christian mentioned something. Go after it and see it and bring it back to us. And come back to Danielle and John Feaster, because they're running the programs.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a organization that is specifically targets, post-secondary students and support for, funding for, and that sort of thing, that would be great. I guess just if it's reentry based, we work with probably about 50 some reentry programs in the community that help support, reentry services, both pre and post release and employment and stuff. I mean, off the top of my head, gatekeepers, prepare for parole. There's just tons of them. But none of them are specifically devoted to post-secondary, right? They work with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to keep us a little on track, and John F. can go next. Yes, to all of this. But I think the main focus of what we're trying to do is specific for the college programs. So colleges can continue and new ones can start. So it has to do with funding our programs, like Goucher and Georgetown are on this call, UB is on this call, Bowie is also part of this group, and there's a lot of threats. So I think the biggest concern is making sure that is there some state funds, because grants are great, but when I write a grant, it's short-lived, and I have to explain how I'm going to sustain what I'm doing. And that requires the university to contribute or the state to contribute or other grants. So it's really hard to actually, there's great opportunities out there, but it's keeping it going, which would require us to write grant after grant after grant. I'm sure Georgetown and Goucher can speak to this, because a lot of their work is privately funded, and they have people who do this specific for their programs. I have a university foundation who fundraises for the entire university, but they ask me to write the grants, and I can't possibly do that. I have an email right now. They're like, "Hey, did you check on that grant you applied for?" I'm like, "No, I don't want to, because I almost don't want to get it because I don't have time to do it." It's a lot. But the focus is money for college programs to operate. Not so much reentry. Reentry is, of course, a very important piece and not separate, but I think the focus right now is the education piece on the inside. And then reentry is a second conversation, but I'm going to let John jump
Andrew,
in.
you stole my thunder. I was going to explain exactly the same thing. I actually have a pretty big grant unit here. I like Christian's idea a whole lot, but unfortunately, it's not a sustainable model for us here at the state level, especially since just very specifically when we hire somebody, they just have to be a permanent employee, whether or not we even get the grants. A lot of grants don't allow for a very high percentage of administration costs. Usually it's like 10% of the grant. So you get a $200,000 grant, $20,000 of it can be used for administrative purposes, so on and so forth. So while I love the idea, unfortunately, we're not usually set up and structured in a way to allow a position like that to self-sustain itself. And for what it's worth, there's not a lot of grants out there that we've seen specifically for this purpose, and they're all competitive. None of it is guaranteed. So it's up and down. It's different every year, and yeah.
Yeah.
But Andrea, you hit the nail on the head with that. Thank you.
Well, thanks for adding to it.
I understand that too. I mean, when I worked for the state, when we got grants, I had to take 20% of my time and work on it no matter what, it's just, that's what happens. Some state employees got to take responsibility.
I have a question. This is probably a stupid question and shows my ignorance of financial things. But I mean, in a way, it seems like tuition is a fiction. I mean, when the university is charging tuition or not, sure, it's going to overhead and other things, but the salaries, but still some of that is, I don't know, excess or profit or something. And you just wonder, couldn't the university, forego tuition in some cases without it's really making a material difference?
Oh, Judith.
When Pell goes away, I'm going to ask that question.
Sorry, it was a naive question, I promise.
Oh, it's the right one.
It's a good one.
Am I the only one with the hand up?
No, I think Meredith did because
Yeah. As far as tuition goes, like the way that Goucher operates, the tuition for students is like $8,000 or something. It's significantly reduced for GPEP students. But we still need to pay faculty and staff and buy all of the supplies. So a lot of the cost is not even related to tuition. It's related to all of our operating costs, essentially, if that helps.
Where do you come up with a $3,000 figure?
Honestly, that's like it's like eight. I don't know. That's a question for our financial aid office that I'm happy to ask you. But every couple of years, we do some sort of calculation to figure out what the tuition is, and then there's a portion of Pell is applied to it, and then all of our private fundraising covers the rest, and then it covers all of the other costs on top of it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if I could jump in quickly, I did a similar thing where I looked at the cost of our program, and to run our program, it is like $10,000 a year per student. I could probably get it down to $8,000. I'm not sure how, Goucher did their calculation, but I had to report that out to a funder, and I had to do lots of math and like figuring out how much it really costs to run our program. And that includes staff, and so it's not tuition I didn't count tuition cost. I counted staff and books and supplies and those kind of, and instructors, technology, like those kind of things. And I came
operation
up with
costs.
operation
The biggest
portion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, cause I didn't count what our tuition was in that price, but, yeah.
And I see Emily just joined from Georgetown. I mean, they, but them and Goucher kind of have that higher because of being the private. Yeah.
Judith, I just wanted to add that, so I work with higher education on both the credit side and non-credit side. And I just want to point out the fact that on the non-credit side, we do a lot with our community colleges for training and certifications. And the negotiation usually starts out at per student cost, but after some conversations, it's, hey, you get us 20 students, it'll cost you X amount of dollars, and it'll be the same whether it's 20 or 40. So for what it's worth, I do agree that there are some minimum costs involved, but I also believe that once you hit a certain threshold, that our educational institutions should be able to negotiate. I know they don't typically on the credit side specifically, but on the non-credit side, it's a normal course of business to negotiate very specifically what you're talking about, Judith.
And the thing with our post-secondary programs, that they've
All
got to
credit
be
bearing. Yeah.
credit. Yeah.
Understood, but it usually happens at the same institution with the same faculty in the same classrooms. It's just one, I'm going to take this business class as a certification instead of taking this business class as a 3-credit class, and there are different costs involved. So just a thought.
And just
Judith,
to keep,
you're really on to something there, Judith.
and
Well,
also,
and John, if I might say it really quick, Steve, that is a point. Like, one of the things that happens too is if we don't have, I believe, like Warwick's is a minimum of 10 students. If we go below that 10, they can't even hold classes. But if you go above that 10, then there's not an additional cost for those additional students. But if you go below, like literally they cannot provide that service. Yeah.
yeah, there's a minimum. I mean, of students. I mean, one of my daughters is a department chair of math at a university, and she's into recruiting students, and they have to have a minimum for each course to justify it, So, but the other thing is we haven't mentioned here is public safety is footing the bill for the space. I mean, unlike teaching on campus where that's also an issue. I mean, space and some of the chairs and tables or whatever, classroom space. So that's always a positive. Say, well, we can give you the space, but that's an issue here now. Space,
Should we shift our conversation to space? We have a half an hour left. We should talk about space and incentives and data. I'm not sure which is priority since we only have about 35 minutes left. But real quick, I'll say for the tuition piece, Judy, another piece is in order for Pell to be applied to a student, there has to be tuition there in order for a student to get Pell. And that's kind of complicated, but like we have to set a tuition price for us to receive Pell for an individual. So that's a Pell thing. Just to put that out there. Let's do space.
Andrew, I was going to say for the space conversation, you mentioned that data and space are both on the docket here. For what it's worth, technology does trump space. So if there was a way to get technology involved in a significant way, that could absolutely help with the problem that there is no space, as Danielle put in the comments.
And here's where John Griffin comes in. John, if you want to find a grant or a funder who will fund technology for corrections, then bring it to us, please.
I need 12 million. That's all.
Yeah, and what would you do with 12 million technology-wise?
That is what I used. That's what I applied for the NTIA grant, was 12 million. That'll cover Wi-Fi for every single one of our schools across the state. It'll cover the services. It'll cover 3 computer technicians to be able to actually,
When you say Wi-Fi, does that mean the students would have access to Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Full access or?
Yeah, secured. Well, it's secured.
Firewall.
So right now, those tablets that Labor has run off of cellular, which is extremely expensive. We move to Wi-Fi, that lowers our cost by like half. It is a significant reduction.
But that's compatible with the kind of security considerations that DPSCS has? Yeah,
like it would be, we would put it on our VPN space. Like we have that ability to do that. What it would be is it would come off our network as a segmented line off of our network that would be closed down and shut down with no access to the actual DPS network. It would be a totally segmented Wi-Fi, whatever the technical term for it is. And then from there, all of the colleges will soon be using Bowie. Just started. Labor uses Origin currently right now to provide. Origin will be able to connect into that Wi-Fi signal and provide the LMS, provide access for virtual learning, reentry services, workforce development. I mean, just all of it. So it would be able to be segmented off and it would be a secured line, but it would be so that the colleges, all the students would have access on their laptops without us having to figure out how do we do this with an access point and not have them, hack into our network. And right now we're using our virtual visitation line, which is horrid, and it's connected to our OCMS case management network. So all they're getting is little circles when they're trying to connect to OCMS. So it's not good. We need to, and they can connect back to the college. Like yes, but it's going to cost me $12 million to implement. We did the quotations. We got all this. I got a whole list of everything we needed because I had to submit that with the grant application along with how many people we would need to maintain it and everything. So it's 12 million.
So that it sort of makes, getting back, funding, space, and incentives and technology is really, I just think we have a fourth kind of thing that keeps coming up there, And
we do also have this board.
You can expand space, in a way, if you can do a lot of. But
one of the things on that grant was also new laptops for all the students and teachers, so that what we could do is they could take that laptop back and forth from the housing unit to the school. And so then we would have the ability for them to do their actual work on the housing unit and not always have to do it in the school. So then they wouldn't have to have these 4-hour study hall sessions. They could do some of that work on the housing unit, and that would free up some space so we could have additional classes too, right? So there's some good, they would still need study hall to meet with teachers and stuff, but maybe we could do study hall in the housing unit instead, in the areas we have there. So it would sincerely help our space needs. We could even do some of the virtual classes on the housing unit, right? So it would really help.
And it would be a significant help for the normal educational classes as well, which only happen during the day, and they can't coincide with work. So with technology and all that, they can work and go to class. They don't have to make a decision between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could do classes in the evening on their tablet or laptop, go to work during the day.
And right now they have to decide.
Normal people.
But one important caveat, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, is this is a startup grant in a sense where it's going to provide the infrastructure and colleges for 1 to 2 years to implement. And after that, the colleges have to pay the cost of maintaining the technology. And that is an additional cost that will be difficult, considering, especially for the public universities that are facing cuts. And so there's an additional cost again towards the colleges. And
that is something we agreed DPSCS would pay the first year costs. So the first three semesters for Origin for the colleges to connect to. The grant that I did receive, we got money for that also. So that's 2 years that they have. But after that 2-year mark, yes, the college has to foot the bill. And it's $299 per student per year, something to that effect, or per semester. I forget what it is. For 300 students, it was $180,000 for the 3 semesters for the Origin. So, UB has the most students. I think Goucher, you guys have similar amount of students. So it adds to that additional funds that they already don't have to be able to have to,
So the grant, what is the status of this grant?
Well, the 2 years, the money for them to do the technology for the 2 years, I got that grant and we're paying for that. But the $12 million for NTIA, I believe they got out before January 20th, the funding for that. So now in FY 25 or 26, there was supposed to be another 250 million. I doubt that's going to happen now. So I doubt we're going to see that money. I don't see. And the sad part is literally in December, we were curing our budget with them. They were asking questions. We were at that home stretch of that final evaluation, then that we got our email, and
So now it's
if you look at who they funded, like
it's federal.
no state corrections agency was funded.
It's federal money, right?
Yes.
Okay, that answers that question.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I said I doubt that we're actually gonna see that extra, that other 200 million. So.
But the other part of space, though, is when we take the visits, I'm going to ask some questions, you know, like we just to see what physical space is dedicated to, because there used to be, you know, I carry this long history of what used to be, you know, and all that, and I wonder over time if we lost educational space or not to other programs, and I mean so. But then again, even if you get the space, you have the correctional officers, you have, you know, or if you want to take space back that somebody else took, you got other programs that came in there and they don't want to leave, you know. So, but then I know Ann, who's not on this, but mentioned that at the women's, there's some space was given over to certain people when you go in and use it once a week, you know, like staff, and then the rest of it's empty. And I can't be specific with that, but if she were on, she could. But so sometimes it's a matter of how you use space, and it doesn't have to be 100% dedicated to one thing. Other people can come in at different times, you know. So that's a lot of consideration for the college programs. But then the college programs are mostly at night, you know. So, right? I mean, we have how many day programs do we have for college?
Georgetown is a day program, and I think Meredith
It depends what you call night. I mean, the classes usually often start at 2:30 or 3.
Yeah, it runs 2:30 to about 6, guys, right? Like the class.
What is shift change?
We currently run 2:30 to 9, and
oh, I'm sorry, 2:39.
Will
Yeah,
be full time. Yeah,
and that is when we have the most actual space and officers available to do it, because we have more programming during the day. So the evening time is they are actually getting full access to the entire school during the evening.
What time, Danielle, does shift change?
I believe it's 3. It's like 7 to 3, 11.
Yeah, so
11 to 7. Yeah.
Anything after that, there's fewer officers.
No, actually, we have the same amount of officers during the day and during the night. So,
Okay.
But we have more space in the evening because, like, labor is not in the school, right?
Okay.
So then all the colleges then take over the school in the evening. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's share. I mean, we were at a premium. Like that school is from 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. packed.
There's another one that I mean, Danielle, you're the only person from public safety here. There used to be one we had Pell Grants back before 1994. There were pre-release students going onto campus over at UMBC. And boy, that really increased because we had hundreds of people out, and there was a big scandal because somebody said, "Oh, they're out there committing crime." Well, they did a raid on. They arrested all the students in their classes and brought them in, and they didn't find one was doing anything wrong, and nobody was out of bounds. But the program, you know, went like that because, you know, that's politics. So.
And Ainsley has her hand up when Danielle's done.
I was just going to say, if we had a program at our pre-releases, that would, I mean, women's has a pre-release unit, but I don't know how many of them are actually pre-release eligible, right? They have to be work release eligible and on minimum security to do that. I know most of our guys at JCI do not qualify for that. They're mostly all higher, you know, levels. MCIJ, it's medium, very little of them would actually qualify for that. So, yeah. And we do that on purpose. Like we put our 4-year bachelor degree program at our places where we're going to have longer people there for longer, right? But I do have Anne Arundel going into Dorsey Run. So, you know, but that's only an 18-month program. Like it's not, you know, and so, yeah.
Okay.
Ainsley, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to kind of talk about two things. One, I wanted to highlight the question that Karen had in the comments, if incarcerated students are eligible for scholarships. Since I know we were talking about state funding, that they're not eligible for that right now. And second, I was wondering if we might want to talk about next steps for the work group, like what information we need to move forward. Because it sounds like we're identifying a lot of issues right now, and I'm wondering if we want to identify what we need in order to work on those issues.
Yeah, John and Karen also have hands up, but I agree. Let's let them comment, and then we can move to talking about next steps. And I really want to just talk quickly about the data piece also before we wrap up. So John, I don't know who was next. Sorry, not sure who had.
Okay, well, just real quick, I just wanted to follow up on the space thing. Coming recently out of the system, I can tell you from ECI's perspective, custody staffing is going to be a real big factor in any space discussion that we have, because no matter what space is talked about for using for instruction inside, whether it's education space, housing unit space, whatever, it's all going to come down to whether or not they feel like they have enough officers to cover that. And just from my perspective from the inside, despite all of DPSCS's efforts to solve their staffing problems, they're still really struggling. I mean, it's a hard issue. And at ECI, at least, at any given day, they are constantly fighting to cover all the posts that they have to fill. And many posts get collapsed. And despite their best efforts, education posts get collapsed. We can move into the housing units and even there and use their day rooms or the recreation rooms. But even then, sometimes a particular unit may not get their full complement of officers on a given day. And then guess what? That unit is now locked down and nobody can come out, and because they don't have the security staff present to guarantee the safety of the institution. So that's going to, I just wanted to tell you guys, it's going to kind of go hand in hand with any space discussion that we have, because that is it's still a major issue.
And John's right, and that's especially true for daytime. Our correctional education programs get shut down a lot due to officer shortages. Not so much our higher ed in the evening, because we usually have more staff in those shifts, right? And we don't need as, I don't think, I mean, you guys can answer this, but I don't think you're getting shut down anywhere near like our daytime laborers programs are. It is a night and day. So, because we just have more staff to cover in the evening than we do in the daytime.
Yeah, and we've been really lucky at JCI lately. When there's a lockdown in the facility, they still let us continue, which I don't know why. It wasn't like that the first 5 years, but past 2 years, they still let us operate in the evening when there's issues and they're not letting people in. They let us in and they let us operate. So that's been really, really great. Let's jump to Karen for her brief question, and then we'll talk about our next steps and data quick.
I guess my question would be, and we might not have the answer to it now, but as far as space goes, it's never really, I can only speak from the women's perspective, and I can think of a ton of space that could be used, but I guess it would be helpful for us to understand, in order to have a additional class take place in this space that I know is available, because I see it empty all the time, how many more officers do we need assigned to that post, right? Because there are day rooms in the buildings that can be used. There are offices in Center Hall that can be used, which is the main hub over at the women's, where lots of classes already take place. There's a baby bonding room that gets used once every 3 months and otherwise is just set up with toys, right? So I guess it would be helpful to know what is DPSCS requiring so that we can know what we're working with already. So I'll just sort of float that, and then maybe it's something that we can find out. Maybe the answer is 0, but in thinking about space, I think that's helpful to know.
Yeah, and in thinking about space and next steps, it would be maybe interesting to have these snapshots of each facility and what we know, like what Karen just shared. Here's the possibilities based on our experiences and what we see and know. Hey, public safety, is that feasible? Would that work? I think we could do that for all the facilities, especially with this group. We have, our personal experiences of living or going in and what we see as possible. And perhaps these visits that are coming up in April might also add to that. So I don't know if that's a good next step of gathering, I don't know, snapshots or case studies, whatever we want to call it. But I think that would be helpful because every facility is different. And there would be different approaches across different facilities. And of course, technology would solve problems everywhere. So yeah, then tech is a problem. But you don't have to always have tech in certain spaces to run a discussion group. Judy likes to teach sometimes without tech. So it just really depends on, I think we can be creative in using spaces that have tech and that those that don't, because we're used to juggling that currently in the spaces that we have. So I think for next time, we could maybe start with the agenda of talking about space and technology and then incentives, because we didn't get to incentives today. Just in thinking of how we kind of start next time we meet. And also in terms of next steps when it comes to the state aid and state funding. Ainsley started putting together a nice, I want to call it a fact sheet on what's happening in other states around access to state aid for tuition. So we could finalize that since it's in pretty good shape and share it out for next time to just see what is happening elsewhere. Maybe that would be helpful in terms of your conversations, Danielle, with MHEC and what's possible. Just it's good to know what's happening in other states. We have a few minutes left, so I want to just quickly jump to data collection because Steve shared out that data report that we received. I think everyone saw that or had access to that. I looked through it. I'm not sure if anyone had questions about it or if you didn't have a chance to see it, but I'm just going to share what I saw in terms of how it connects to higher ed. The major thing on there that I saw that they didn't have, this came from labor, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so the only piece was question number 4, where we asked for the percentage of people in custody in the state facilities that come in with a GED or high school diploma. They didn't have that information. So they said that's information that public safety could provide to us. So that's a piece of data that we were interested in and that we definitely need in order to help guide our conversation around access and how many people are even eligible for higher ed programming. So we just don't have that data. Yeah, it was number 4.
Yeah.
I think that was the main question connected to higher ed that was useful for higher ed.
Can I give you some other, just briefly, as much as I can?
Yeah.
The other groups were the GED, ABE, special ed group, and career tech. They're a lot more of those questions are relevant to them, and we were having a very good discussion this morning, career tech. So, but you're right. The number 4 was the one, and Danielle is starting to share some data they're getting from the longitudinal stuff. We are beginning to get some answers as to how many people come in, have a high school diploma, have a GED, and how many are getting it when getting that GED when they're in. And we're going to go over some of that data and send it out to you guys. Danielle and I will be talking and Ainsley, because there's some limits to its accuracy, but it's pretty dismal that most people are not coming in with a high school diploma or a GED. And then overall, we have about 50,000 people that have gone through since 2014 to 2024 who came through the system, and only 10% of them or so got a GED, while they were incarcerated, which is like whatever happened to the other 40,000. It's terrible that we're not serving more people. But that's early data. We're going to have to talk about that. But we also sent out a survey, and there are all the state directors. Danielle sent it out today. Angie and I put it together, asking a lot about the structure of their organization, but also a few basic questions about funding and things for higher ed. And as that comes in, we'll put it together. I mean, it'll probably take a few weeks for these people to respond, but they're all friends and colleagues of Danielle from all the different states. So we should have some data for you on some of these questions we're asking. And
Do you remind what this document you were just referring to with the data that we've got that doesn't have the GED and high school diploma numbers? I'm not sure I know where that is at this point.
We haven't shared that today. Danielle,
Oh,
it's getting some Maryland longitudinal data, and she just shared a little bit of it the other day, yesterday maybe, and or even this morning. I'm not sure when it came in, but it covers 2014 to 2024, how many people came into the system and what they know about how many had a high school diploma or a GED when they came in. And then of those that did not, how many of them achieved a GED during that time. And we're serving, maybe 10% of those people got a GED while they're with us, which means that 90% of the people aren't eligible for career tech, higher ed, and Maryland Correctional Enterprises because they don't have a high school diploma. So we've got a big population we're missing, and we'll share that data as we clean. Danielle's got some reservations on the exact numbers, whether they're going to do some cleanup on that. But we're finding out that we're missing so many people. We're just not getting enough people into school. We don't have enough space or whatever the issues are, and that's stuff. So that's basically what we're doing with data. We're going to keep. And then Ainsley's putting this stuff into, as we go along, we put it into, some kind of charts in readable form as we go. So, and the other thing, and I just meant to John, we have a lot of data in this report that you all received, that data being tabulated. We still don't know what it is. And I don't know, the career type people are going to want me to ask questions back to Director Rubin on that. So I haven't formulated questions yet because we're going back and forth. But like, when are we going to get this data that's being formulated, that hasn't been answered? So that's another piece that came up. I just pass that on to John right now.
Dr. Stir, I appreciate that. And I think that is a very reasonable question to ask as far as an ETA on the specific data that you're looking for. And to be honest with you, if you wanted more insight into some of the hurdles and challenges that we've run into trying to gather this data, it really is piecemeal here and there and not consistently, shared and housed across the state. So it really requires, 30, 40, 50 man hours worth of time to hunt it all down. And as you can imagine, the Department of Labor is under in crisis mode with everything that's happening with the federal transition, and the correctional ed team is pitching in to help and volunteer methods as well. So I apologize for any delay in that, but please reach out to Director Rubin with the concerns that you have. Very specifically ask for
I will within the next few days, probably next week, send some questions. So if anybody in the higher ed group here has some questions for her regarding this, I mean, you did bring up question number 4, so we'll include that. But it is a major thing for us, that collection of data. We really need some basic data to run education programs. And if we're having a hard time getting it, and then as the program goes along, attendance and shutdowns and numbers of staff and all that, if we really need that data in order to plan and evaluate. And if we're not getting it, it puts us in a bad position. So it's one of the things we'll probably talk about with this commission. How do you do this? What's this is a problem overall, but so anyway, that's my data report, Andrea.
Never easy. Thank you, Steve. Okay, we have to wrap it up. I need to jump off, and everyone else needs to. It's 2:00. So we will regroup in a month. And
can I ask one request? I am going to be gone from March 13th to the 28th. I'm going to be on the Rhine and Moselle River, so I know you're all jealous, and that's tough. I mean, I wish you all a good trip someplace, but I would like to be back for the next meeting. The 20th is, I think it's a Friday in March. So could we do our next meeting early, the next week or whatever fits next week, and which would be April
3rd. Because we meet on March 27th.
Till 27th, I'll be still there.
Yeah, so the next Thursday is the 3rd, April 3rd.
You're welcome to. I will not be there. I'm literally in conferences from March 21st to April like 12th.
Yeah.
Like back to back.
Commission, the commission meets, am I on mute? The
What-
commission meets on April 3rd, it looks like.
Yeah. So, we could meet after that if the commission, that same day, if that works for you guys. Because the commission would meet at what do we,
10.
10
It says,
a.m.?
in the calendar, it says 10 on my calendar, I should
Yeah.
say.
So, nobody's saying nay or
I'm
nobody's.
sure that not everybody will be able to make any date. So, but Steve is one of the indispensables.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's
I've been
fine by
wondering.
me too, but I'd love Danielle to be there since she's got the inside knowledge. But maybe we could just ask you to give us a written update on certain things that we can share out. I don't know.
Yeah. For what it's worth, if you guys come up with the dates and provide them to Danielle, I think she is a very important and valuable resource as far as the conversation is concerned in general.
Right.
So I would almost schedule this around her calendar as it allows. Like she's
It doesn't have to be a Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm okay, with another date. I can't do it that Tuesday, the 1st, but I could do it any other time of the week.
Sorry, Danielle.
26th and 27th, I'm good, or the 7th or 8th, because I'll be home.
Of April.
Yes, like those are the only 4 days I'm going to be home in that big time block. So
Do we want to continue that discussion offline and
Yes.
confirm that?
So let's look at the 7th as a possibility. If we want to get Danielle, I can do the 7th. Okay.
maybe Ainsley can send us sometimes like a doodle for that day.
Do a doodle. Okay.
Yep.
Ainsley will do a doodle on this. Okay.
Yep.
We'll try to do the 7th if that works. And then, okay. No, there's some indispensable people. We gotta have labor, we gotta have